This is going to be a bit of a shorter video because I don't need a whole lot of time to explain why you might need some of these items. These are a few RC accessories that will totally make you faster. And if not, at least make you look like you know what you're doing. Before we begin, I'll take this time to remind you to subscribe to the channel and be sure to like and comment on any items I may have missed. With that out of the way, let's begin. Now I'm starting off with a pretty expensive item, I know, but bear with me for a second. A GoPro can do a lot more than you think. You see, even though you may not be posting your footage to YouTube for meager ad revenue, you can also just watch your race footage back anyway to see where exactly you're messing up and where you can improve. Believe me when I say you'll be surprised with how slow you may look to yourself after you watch your own footage. Granted, a GoPro is no use if you can't mount it on something to actually record yourself driving. Here you have a few options. I know that Ryan Harris uses a good old-fashioned hat clip that comes with a few different models of GoPros like the Hero 7 that I personally bought, along with each subsequent model of GoPro after it. Personally, I use this head strap because A, I don't mind looking like a nerd, and B, I like being able to take it off and fiddle with the settings without taking it off of clip or something like that. Lastly, if you don't feel like getting a GoPro but you still want an action camera, don't worry. There's still plenty of options out there that'll work just fine if you want to avoid GoPro as a brand for whatever reason. One company that makes a pretty good action camera is DJI with their Osmo Action. Anyway, like I said, being able to watch your driving footage back is great and all, but so is being able to watch it back with someone else. Preferably someone who is a better driver than you, so you can point out stuff that you might miss. If you can't afford either the Osmo or a GoPro, you can also just use a phone clip and attach it to your hat or something like that. About a dozen companies make stuff like that for different phones. Being able to see what you're doing, believe it or not, is pretty important to being able to work on your car. As a result, having a dedicated pit light that you can use all of the time is pretty important. This is especially important at places that don't have lights under the pits themselves if you have to bring your own table, or any low light environment in general, like an indoor setting or if you're under a canopy. Again, about a dozen or so companies make pit lights. Personally, I use this really old pit light that I got back in 2012 secondhand. It does work pretty well, but since this particular one is discontinued and the lights can be a bit finicky sometimes, I think it might be time for an upgrade, or perhaps even a degrade. Let me explain. Since you're only really going to be working on your car at a desk or a pit table, you don't really need a pit light that you need to charge up unless you really want to feed into the saying, if you want to be fast, you have to look fast. If you don't mind having to plug in a light to an outlet like some sort of caveman, or you don't feel like spending a solid $50 on what is essentially a lamp, you can simply buy just a good old-fashioned desk lamp, preferably a small one to stay as portable as possible. If this video was in any particular order, these two would probably be at the top. If you're the kind of person who likes to work on the RCs, or are someone who would like to minimize the amount of time they spend working on their RCs, an electric screwdriver would be an amazing investment. It may not make you any money, but it will certainly save you a lot of time, and I mean a lot of time. If I had an electric driver for when I was building my RC8 B4E, I probably could have shaved off a solid 2 hours of that build time. Of course, which one you get will depend on your budget, but there are plenty of options out there. I personally plan to buy this particular one from Ryobi. It's also important to grab one with this 1/4 inch socket, as that's what most hobby tools use. If you need a bit more power in your driver, you might be better off to grab an electric power drill. Now this may seem strange, but if you're already into indoor racing where tires need to be broken in, you know exactly what I'm about to talk about. After grabbing an electric drill, you're going to need a tire break-in tool. Depending on which scale car you have, you're either going to need a 12mm hex size or a 17mm size. J-Concepts makes one for both, but it's pretty pricey, so if you're only running 10 scale, just grab this one from AKA for $15. Now, there's a whole process to breaking in your tires, and I've already done a tire guide before, so I'm not going to go too into detail as to what you'll need to do to break in a tire. What I will do is link off to a great video by Ryan Harris who on said topic. If you're the kind of person who learns through reading better than listening to a lecture on the topic, then maybe a setup book that you can carry around with you can help you figure out what does what on your car and give you a better understanding of how to diagnose a certain setup shortcomings on your car. I personally have this book by Huddy that I got with a setup rig that I bought a while ago, which is another thing that can help you if you're willing to shell out the dummy prices these things can fetch. Anyway, there are a few different places you can find info on how to set up your car. First, depending on what brand car you have, there's the manual. I know Techno and I think Associated manuals have guides on how to set up your car, Techno's in particular being very detailed and help a lot. If you want to go even more into detail, you can go for a really good guide from Dave B. Stevens called the Essential Off-Road RC Racer's Guide. Quite the creative name. The good thing about this guide though is that there's an entire part of the guide dedicated to diagnosing what's wrong setup-wise depending on how your car acts. It's really helpful. There's also the Invisible Speed Guide by JQ & Co. Both are roughly the same price if you buy a paperback version, but if you buy the Essentials book just as a PDF file, you can get it for half off. Still a decent chunk of change, about $30, but it helps a lot. Contrary to what you may believe, you don't need a whole lot of tools to set up your car, nor do you need to spend dummy amounts of money on the tools you do need. The first thing you can add to your arsenal will be a camber gauge. This will allow you to set the camber on your car. Simply plop your car down onto a flat, level surface. Side note, you can use a setup board like this specifically made for RCs, but you can use anything that is flat and level, from solid wood to cooking and cutting boards. Then go ahead and set the camber on your gauge to the desired level. For here we're going to use 2 degrees of negative camber. Then measure it up to the corresponding wheel like this. If it matches, great. If not, adjust the car or adjust the camber on the car accordingly using a turnbuckle wrench. Next is the ride height gauge. Now, there are 3 main different types of ride height gauges out there. You have the sort of lever style of action that you have right here, the clicker style gauge, and the step style gauge. Setting your toe can be a bit difficult sometimes if you don't have the setup rig that can cost upwards of $100, but don't worry. You can simply use a micrometer for measuring your tie rods to hit spec most of the time. You can pick these up online for $10 to $20 all day. The last handy thing to pick up for most people would be a temperature gun. This will help you tune your motor for optimal running. The magical number you're running for is going to be 150 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit or 65 to 71 degrees Celsius. Any higher and you're going to start burning out your motor over time. Now, there are a few different ways you can store your RC cars and tools. Once again, you have a choice between a few first-party dedicated RC options, along with some other non-RC related options you can find at Home Depot or Lowe's if you're a square. Personally, I use a Stanley tool bin I've had for over a decade. I'm not 100% sure if they make them anymore in this configuration, but I know that there are other options out there very similar to this, so I'll be sure to link them in the description below, as it works pretty well. It carries 2 buggy-sized cars, usually my 2-wheel drive buggy and 4-wheel drive buggy, along with my tools and other such things I may need like extra tires or spare parts. However, if you want to look cool, you can certainly buy one of these carrying cases for RC cars on general RC sites like A-Main and Beach RC. This is the same sort of case with Tupperware boxes to hold things like hardware and other things of the sort. I have 2 of these boxes right here, one a bit older than the other, but they work just the same. And that's about it. I do apologize that this video came out a bit later as usual, as I was still recovering from an injury for a little bit. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like the video and comment on any other accessories I may have missed. Also, if you want to support me another way, be sure to check out my Patreon, where I post updates on when my next videos will be out and what they will be about. With that being said, I'd like to thank my patrons Michael Williams, Casey Nix, Ben Reeves, Dave Armstrong, Ryan Lamb, Joe Jenkins, Juliet Lovelace, Brian Lofton, Morrison Wad, and my 2 new patrons, Ricky Ekenlow and Precision Key. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.